And welcome everybody to another episode of the Corner Blue. I'm Andres Rico and I'm here with the co-host Hugo Alvarado, aka Selecta Talent. And we want to go over and break down just what was the recent match between La Selecta and the US men's national team for the CONCACAF Champions League that just went down 2 nights ago. We've all been busy parenting. I actually had to watch the game on delay because I was driving home from Boise, Idaho, of all places. So I had to just go in dark mode and trying to avoid my phone at all costs. And thank God, because I got bombarded by a ton of friends, family, also listeners checking in with the score. An interesting result, albeit I'll take it, a 1-1, a draw that I think superseded any type of expectations that we had going into this match, considering how they had done versus Granada. Hugo, what's your take walking away from this match now that it's kind of cooled down? What's your feeling on how the team performed?
Performance-wise, I think it was one of the best performances that we've had under Coach Perez. I will probably put it in the same category as the Qatar game that we almost tied in terms of team performance. Obviously, the conditions of the field were not optimal. It affected both equally. I think our players adapted much faster. A lot of them are used to playing probably in similar conditions. But I think despite the ongoing rain that we've had for prior to the game, I think it was like 2 days nonstop. It's been raining a lot. I think despite all of that, the field, at least in the first half, still allow for the ball to roll. You know, both teams were able to somewhat play very well in the style that like playing. And then the second half, we could see that the field had taken its toll, and it wasn't the best. But I think that it was not a game where we can say that it was ugly because of the field. I think that both teams played a pretty attractive style of soccer, and of course it would have been different with a perfect field. But performance wise, I think that I'm always positive and I'm always hoping for the best, and I believe in the group that we have. So I was not one of those who were saying that we were going to lose 4-0 and that we were going to get killed by the US. I didn't think that was going to happen. In fact, when you and I spoke, and I think we recorded this after the second Granada game, we were talking about the different motivation that players have when they play one of the top teams in the area, and it just turns into a very, very different game.
Yeah, I call it like the Caribbean syndrome, where it's like the team adjusts no matter how low, they just stoop to the level of the opponent from the Caribbean in general. I think obviously it changes when it's a Jamaica, when it's a Haiti even, or Trinidad and Tobago, but for the in general, yeah, I'd call it the Caribbean syndrome. And we saw him snap out of it. Just want to go over really quick all the talk about the pitch, and that's something that's been, pretty intense in terms of the debate on Twitter and whatnot, of this whole concept of, the US being indignant about the conditions of El Cusca. And okay, was El Cusca in a pristine condition? When is it ever? It was very far from pristine, but was it the Anguilla match from 2012, I think it was, where it was pouring throughout the entire game. You could see literally water on top of the pitch for the whole match, to the point that the team decided to play long balls in the air, controlling it and taking shots. Like, it was, no, it did not affect that game, the outcome of the game, in the sense, at least in the first half, like you said, where there were still passes on the ground. You didn't have to make those adjustments of almost playing like a beach soccer style of play. The US still got to do its thing. Granted, like you said, second half, it started to get messy, but it just doesn't come across as the most genuine of complaints, or even noble, you would say, when you start hearing the US national team staff, players, fans complaining about weather conditions. It's just very ironic when you hear that type of talk, considering that CONCACAF has scheduled these types of matches in the summer, in the tropics, when they know it's the wet season, it's the rainy season, it's hurricane season. More often than not, these types of matches are going to be rained out or affected, as we saw. So that's number one, the timing, the scheduling. El Salvador didn't pick the weather or choose to play on El Cusco on purpose. Like you said, it affects teams both ways in that sense. Our guys are more used to it, so I think they were able to make some of those adjustments better. But for the most part, you never saw the ball rolling, just get stuck on the pitch. All you saw was a couple gringos sliding in the lodazal and be like, "Ay, me ensucié." That's the extent of it, in my opinion. So it's just funny that the US has been complaining about playing in some lodo when they've taken El Salvador and Canada as well, because they had the same experience across the board in Honduras. When you hear these guys complaining about it, but they on purpose, pick some of the worst weather conditions to play in, and they can't handle a little bit of lodo on their gear. Like, come on, use some spray and wash. Someone else is gonna wash that. You're gonna get a new kit anyway. Anyway, that's my banter on the weather. I just had to get that out because it was annoying the heck out of me. About the game, though, from what I was able to see, I think Hugo decided to put an 11 of players that are at a good level now, and not necessarily banking on who he thinks or wants him to be in the future. And I think that's when you see an effective selecta under Hugo Perez. Like you mentioned, the Gold Cup versus Qatar, the best players on that squad were there. It's not like they were trying to double dip on, I really want to develop so-and-so for the future. No, he picked his group of who he liked and who was playing best to his system, and he played them throughout that tournament. I think with the Octagonal, they had to double dip, and even Jerson mentioned it here that it was a hard dual task of picking pieces, thinking in the future versus just right now. And they kind of paid the price on a lot of the high intensity matches, in my opinion. I'm not criticizing, it's just my opinion. But I think the better 11 that was available to Hugo Perez from his convocatoria was put on the pitch. And I'd say for the most part, they delivered. My wild card would be Kevin Reyes, and seeing him elevate his game, just the confidence that he was playing with, making those runs down the right, dragging the ball, cutting to the opposite foot, just making some defenders look silly. That was a huge surprise to me. That's something that we talked about with you, Hugo, about seeing him from that game against Costa Rica to now, that you see that progression. But what other players would you destacar or highlight from that performance?
Well, I agree with a lot of the things that you said about the players. A player that I had always, I think since I scouted him, and you asked me, what do you think are Cristian Martinez's strength? I always said that he was a player who is not someone who has a lot of projection to the attack, but is someone who's very athletic. Obviously, he's bigger than the players that we have in that position, like Narciso. But he's a player that covers a lot of space. He hustles, and he is very solid in the defensive side of things. He's a very solid player. He's not someone he's not going to do magic with the ball or try to do anything fancy, but he's solid. Almost reminds me of Roldan, Alex Roldan, in a way, where he seems to be so solid no matter where he plays, right? I mean, you even saw Christian. There was a point in which we had a counter attack and he got the ball. He had like 3 defenders. It was like 3v1. And he, like, we know that he was not going to go on the 1v1 against any of those guys, but he was able to hold the ball and at least allow for players to get to the attack. So for me, I think that not a lot of people are talking about him, but I think that his performance and the job that he did in the midfield, combined with Hugo's change of formation of playing with 2 defensive midfielders, I think it worked. I think it worked for the team. It worked to control a very talented U.S. midfield, and I think that overall, I mean, I highlight Cristian Martinez's work. Kevin Reyes, I think Kevin Reyes kind of, if he can keep that level, he's definitely a player that could be in the starting 11 easily. I also want to point out that I think that both Ronald and Dominguez really, I mean, they did a really good job.
Yeah, they really stepped it up.
The entire back line, I mean, Tamacas, Larin, Ronald, and Dominguez, they did really well. I mean, they looked very solid, and I'm very, very, very pleased with the work that they did. The midfield did really well. I think Jairo was probably, he could be the only one.
The starting 11, yeah.
Yeah, that we're used to seeing him be our difference maker. And obviously he was absorbed a lot by the defensive work that he did. And also the field is not a field for what he can do with the ball. So he might be the only one that maybe he didn't perform in the way that we're used to seeing him perform. And then Bonilla, I think Bonilla's work, it continues to be very important for the national team, both defensively as the first line of defense, and what he can do, the movements he can do without the ball, the way he can hold the ball. I think having him back at his close to his top level has been a good thing for the national team.
Having someone up top like an anchor to just add a little bit of stability. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then Mario Gonzalez, I don't want to, I mean, Mario did exceptional. He did a really good job. I've always mentioned, and I try to be very careful because, you don't want to get some people hurt because, you're talking about their team, their club player. Mario, he's really good atajando. He's exceptional. His weakness has always been the crosses and the way he comes out. I think that in this game against the U.S., yes, the pitch was wet, but I was pointing out to my dad that in my observation, his weakness are the crosses. But what I like about this game is that he was at least, he wasn't holding on to the ball, but he was punching it out, which is something you do when it's wet, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think he's improving in that area. I don't even want to get into this discussion, but I was watching today La Polemica and their analysis of the game, and they did point out that in the goal, it was in Mario's box and he hesitated. He tried to come out and then he hesitated, went back. Perhaps that could have been one where he could have come out. But I mean, I'm not gonna,
Yeah, I mean,
criticize
he
him for
had
that.
at
I think
least
he saved
3 or 4 key saves that were gold.
Yeah. So I mean, Mario, the whole team really performed really well.
Let's talk about the mid really quick. You mentioned the two number fives, the double defensive mids, and how in my opinion, I feel like that changed the look of this team right when it needed it, in the sense of creating stability in the mid, but also on the defensive third. Narciso looked a little more loose, a little more comfortable with the ball, a little more starting the transition to attack. I think because he had that security of Cristian Martinez playing behind him. I feel like Martinez absorbed so much of the defensive duties that it did let Narciso wander, create, control some of the tempo in ways that he's not able to when, let's say, he's thrown in there with Darwin or Landaverde, or some of the other guys that have been there. But I do like that role of not having to rely on him solely for defensive duties in the mid.
Yeah. I like we talked about. I mean, Narciso is one of our best players. He pressures. He's always on top of the midfielders. But there are some things that just come naturally with your body, with your size, and when he's not on it, it's like it happens to a lot of our players, the lack of athleticism. When they're not on point, when they miss the mark, it's hard for them to get back up, and stop the players, the opposite team's attack. And that's something that Christian has, that he's more athletic. He's not the biggest guy, but he's bigger than Narciso. And you can see that he plays at a different tempo. His speed, his recovery speed is really good. And physically, I mean, we saw him at the 90 something minute and he was running like it was, the first 10 minutes. So obviously he's in very good shape. So having him there, I think, allows for Narciso to do a little bit more of that creative work that he likes to do, attack a little more. I didn't necessarily miss having like a true number 10. Obviously, when Enrico is in his top form, he's a good player to have there. But I think Landaverde did a really good job playing that kind of like a 10 position, not having to do too much defensive work. I really like playing with the double defensive midfield. I mean, we play like that. I think with De Los Cobos, that was kind of like the standard, not in this last time, but the previous one, where I remember it was most of the time it was
Ramon Sanchez
and Dennis or Oscar Jimenez.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other things, that are kind of moving on from this that I think it's important to point out, that Kevin Reyes didn't travel to Granada. He was one of the players who didn't travel, so people think, why isn't he going? Or maybe he's not convincing the coach. Cristian Martinez didn't play the first 2 matches. And then, they come in the most difficult game, and they perform and they do really well. Why am I pointing this out? Because I think it's important to acknowledge how Hugo is building this team where we don't depend on the 11 starters all the time. We not all, but we have players on the bench who can start at any point and do well. And that's something I appreciate it, because earlier I wanted to see him against Granada a little bit, and he didn't have an opportunity. And then he goes against the US. He plays solid 90 minutes. Kevin Reyes, he didn't travel to Granada for the second game, and I don't think he even played in the first game. I don't remember. And
Yeah, I think it
then
was more of a Pineda game.
yeah, and then he plays in the second game, and in the last game against the US, he does really well. And also the whole argument about USL foreign born versus LMF local players. Kevin Reyes, you and I saw him play here against Costa Rica. He struggled. Lemus did really well against Costa Rica. And then you think, oh, maybe they're not national team players, but the coach gives them an opportunity again, and they perform. And I'm very, very glad that Kevin Reyes played the way he played, because he seemed, I remember seeing him with Santa Tecla when they played FC Dallas in a friendly, and you could see his potential. And he's so young, he seems mature, more mature than he is sometimes. But I mean, again, I hope that he can keep that level, and he's going to be a good player, a very important player for us. And if we end up recovering Pineda, because I wasn't very pleased with what I saw in the first game, imagine we're going to have two really, really solid players to play in that position. But anyways, just to wrap it up, the argument about, well, the USL players are getting a second chance and they get more chances than the local players. I don't really see it that way. And Kevin Reyes is an example of a player who was called to a friendly match, who maybe didn't do so well, but he, got an opportunity again. And we've seen that. We've seen players like, I mentioned Lemus. He had a solid game against Costa Rica, and then he struggled. And then I don't even want to say that he's not going to get called up again. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's room there for something to happen, because other than Nadine, who, by the way, had that wonderful goal against the US, and just showing for this series of matches, just the importance of having a player like that, just the unpredictability, the improvisation that he brings in the attack.
Yeah.
It shone through once again. But I think, the defense is still open for the backups in that sense, for Tamacas and Nadine, respectively. I think Dominguez stabilizing, and Ronald coming back from iffy performances can only make Hugo Perez more comfortable, knowing that he has Gabaceta in the wings waiting to get substantial minutes if needed. We're seeing Zabaleta back in training, so we don't know what the future holds in terms of call-ups for him. But I think the main thing is, having those pieces lined up to not necessarily have to depend on one starting 11, but bring stability, which I think is what the squad lacked throughout the Octagonal, which is completely opposite from what occurred during the Gold Cup, where the team had that time together. You had that solid squad, people knew their roles, but it played out within 2-3 weeks, right, in the Gold Cup, despite the preparation. But the Octagonal, it seemed that with all the injuries, with all the issues with COVID and all the extra stuff going on, it just created way too much instability. And you had some pieces coming in that you never saw after one match, one match day or one match window. And I think that predictability is, something that needs to be built upon heading into these couple of years in limbo, before qualifying starts so that you reach a Gold Cup, with building upon what Hugo started with the first Gold Cup. And I think that will be a really good parameter until qualifying starts yet again. So in the meantime, El Salvador has qualified for Gold Cup with the tie against the US. It won't
Unbeaten.
settle it won't settle the series or the group until March 14th of next year. So in the meantime, the only games that we have looking forward to are going to be friendly matches to close out the year. The only one that has been confirmed, if I'm not incorrect, is a match against Argentina in September in Houston. Other than that, things are still kind of up in the air. Elections for La FESFUT are coming up this month or next month. I forget.
I I honestly
Yeah.
don't know. All I know is
Is
that
that there's elections coming up at some point this summer.
I thought they had already taken place.
Oh,
I just know that July is when the license that the fast food has ends, and that's when the whole thing with Indes and fast food can happen.
yeah. So we're
I don't know.
still waiting for things to play out, administratively. And in the meantime, I think, yeah, you look forward to possibly getting those friendly matches as World Cup tune-ups for those that have moved on and are going to be in the final tournament, and then starting to think about the Gold Cup for next year. Um, Lots of news today. The host cities for 2026 were published. It's a great day to be from the Bay Area because the Bay Area was picked, LA was picked, so I know you're stoked off of that. Houston was picked, so congrats to them. I think more of the predictable hosts were selected, like Seattle, Vancouver, Guadalajara down south. I think the only take that I thought was interesting was that Las Vegas didn't make it, nor the DC area, the DMV. So apologies and condolences to any listeners out in the DMV. That it's weird that the US is one of those rare countries that won't have or hasn't had a final or a game, sorry, in their national capital. So maybe at some point it'll happen, but the good thing is there's a lot of cities on the East Coast to go watch games. So start saving that money, and hopefully this will be the one, at least in my lifetime. So if you're born after 82, hopefully this is the one, and only things to look forward to. I think we're going to keep it nice and sweet for this time. I think the main thing walking away at this point with not that many games planned, I think the main thing we got to keep our eye on are signings, and hopefully, throughout this summer transfer window, we see finally an exodus of players that, it's been a little slow process considering the octagonal started in September. We haven't seen that flux of players to go play abroad like we saw, let's say, with the first De Los Goals process. So
Yeah.
you see rumors, you see stuff about like the Macas and interest in Brazil, yet the journalist publishing it on or tweeting about it, not publishing, but tweeting about it, has like 80 followers, and that's menospreciar. But stuff like that, it makes you a little skeptical. I mean, you'd love to see a bombazo like that, right? But I think at this point, you can just say that it's a
Yeah.
chambre. But of course, you'd love to see the Macas be able to make it out of the country. He's still 27, so he's reaching, the prime status of his career. But you can only go up when you move out. And I think that's the next natural step that I hope plays out this summer, considering that, we don't have any more competitions left throughout the year.
I think it's unlikely. I think it's unlikely that anything happens.
Wah, wah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not an agent. I do not
Used to
make
be,
any
but not
money off
anymore.
of any
Not
player.
anymore. Not anymore.
But I mean, I just observe in terms of our best performers during the qualifiers. Who has the potential to go out?
Super Mario.
Super
But
Mario.
but he's undervalued, he's underrated. I notice a lot of fans hyping, Salvadoran players. I appreciate what y'all are doing, but hopefully it goes beyond that where these guys have the right people representing them in the right context. But yeah, I'd say Super Mario, Tamacas. Larin's already playing in Guatemala, and he has a good thing going there. Obviously, there's always room for better leagues, but I'd say realistically speaking of the locals, let's see, Tamacas, Chicho. Chicho could easily, in my opinion, be playing elsewhere. Heido got signed. I think that was it was a matter of time before he got picked up and moved abroad. And I'm just hoping that his time in the USL proves to more minds the doubters or the skeptics that he can perform at an even higher level. Let's see. I don't know. I think that's like the cream of the crop in terms of what we have right now.
Well, I
Bonilla is
think let
still up
me.
in the air of where he's going to be playing next, right? I think there
Oh,
were rumors if Bonilla, I think there were
yeah, that's
rumors
what I
of
was
going
gonna
to
say.
India.
I think we can expect something with Bonilla. I don't know anything, but he could be a player who could end up playing abroad again. Um, and I think especially after his latest performances, that could be a possibility. But I agree with you. I mean, the only reason I'm a little skeptical, I would love to see some of our players get out of the league in this summer window. But the reason I'm a little skeptical is one, Mario, I think is going to be difficult for Alianza to let him go. Because they just let go of Jimmy Cuellar. So now they only have two goalkeepers. The second one being a young one from the U20 that was just promoted to the senior team. Two, I think that as good as Mario is, I don't think a league like MLS will be interested. I mean, the US produces so many goalkeepers, and they really go for height. I mean, we're talking 6'2" on the small side, higher. So Mario doesn't have that height. Perhaps Mexico. I think Mexico will be like aiming like for a top league for Mario. Probably could be Mexico. And he's gonna have more chances if he improves on that one point that we talked about earlier. And I think with Narciso, the reason I'm just because Narciso has been doing well for so long, and he hasn't gotten his opportunity. So in terms of MLS, look, the way MLS works, and I know this from experience, players come to a Gold Cup, or in this case, qualifier, we play the US. MLS scouts are looking at these guys, and they put the players on the discovery list. So I'm almost sure that Narciso Orellana is in some discovery list of MLS. And I'm just it makes me wonder. Like I ask myself, why hasn't that team or those teams? Because you can be on discovery list first priority, then there might be another team with a second priority. Like it makes you wonder, why haven't any MLS team made a move or try? Maybe they try. Maybe they were asking for too much. I don't know. So MLS, I doubt it. Not that he doesn't have the talent, but I think that if MLS would have done something, they would have done it by now. He's still 27. So it's just that he's been in the senior team for so long and doing well for so long that you think that he's like 30, but he's 27. So technically he's in the prime of his career. Tamaka's same. He's been doing really well. And I just keep thinking MLS, and I'm not saying that because that should be their only destination. But again, I feel a little skeptical because I'm sure he's in some MLS team or teams discovery list. And why haven't they made the move? I don't know. He's had some experience in South America, so perhaps South America could be a destination for him again. And then after that, I mean, we might see something with Enrico. So that's something to see what's going to happen for him in this coming season.
I think that'll be pivotal for him, considering that it's been 2 years of trying to solidify his position on Vitesse, the loan not working out. But I feel like he needs to gain that experience in his own league and be able to bring that back, because I think if he's not playing, in his on it for his club, it's going to be really hard for him to make those trips, take the time, come to a Salvador or wherever the team is playing, and also for the coaching staff to justify him getting all those minutes on the senior team if he's not getting it with this club. And we want to see him keep progressing and keep growing as a player, because we know his potential. We've seen glimpses of it. We've seen the tenacity that he plays with. But yeah, we're just hoping that he can continue growing as a player.
Yeah, so I think Enrico, Bonilla, which is kind of like we're waiting for. We might not be surprised, but we might see them, continue abroad or make a move. And then the rest, I'm just not. I would love to see, but I'm not feeling it right now. But hey, anything can happen. But I think most summer transfer windows will, I think, close at the beginning of July. I think. So we'll see. And then there's nothing. I mean, even September, I think, might be up in the air. We don't.
At this point, a lot that is up in the air. Right? U20s coming up within the next couple of days. We definitely wish them the best of luck to follow in the footsteps of the 2013 team that made it all the way. And I think, there will be interesting players to come out of this squad. Wishing Jerson and the boys the best of luck.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. I have a good feeling that this team might make it to another World Cup. We should talk next episode. We should talk about the U20. I mean, unfortunately, Diego Barahona couldn't get his paperwork done. There was an issue with his mother's birth certificate, the name on Diego's birth certificate being different than the name on the Salvadorian birth certificate, and that just created an issue. Unfortunately,
bureaucratic mess.
I think he was set to be one of our starters in the center back position / left back, and he just couldn't. That's a big loss for the U20s, I think, because he was solid player. But I think there's a lot of guys hungry to play and do well. And I mean, so we have the U20s to look forward to this in a week and a half, 2 weeks.
No, I think it's less. Isn't it coming up like within, I think it's 4 or 5 days. I think it's 19th, 20th or something like that.
Okay.
But we'll correct all this. We'll be posting in, on social media. It's hard to miss out on match days and whatnot. I think this U20 team, has the potential to nick away or kind of erode some of that completely superficial, malintended argument of locals versus foreign born. I think this can be one of those first teams where no one's going to be thinking twice where that player is from, where they were born. I think what we've seen up to this point is just a very cohesive unit in terms of, the locals receiving the foreign based. We've heard it, firsthand from some of the players, but more importantly, you see it on the pitch. And I remember that one tournament that they played, the UNCAF, you could hear the coaching staff, shouting stuff out in Spanish, in English, which is something that, I want to call it refreshing to hear. But I think it's just interesting that, you make those adjustments, you tweak things to make sure that, that communication is out there, which is something that, in other circumstances may not have always been there. But I think this U20 team can definitely do some damage against that whole view of trying to separate, like it's almost gerrymandering your national team, which is bullshit. Like when I watch the game versus the US, I'm not there counting, ay, mira, ¿cuántos son de la USN? ¿Cuántos juegan en parques? Like, no, I'm there to watch the fucking team. I don't care where the fuck they were born. If they have the passport, they have the blood, and they're being called up by the coach, let's see how they do. You don't necessarily have to agree with everything the coach does, but that's the team that was chosen there. You want to be a head coach so bad, you want to talk so much shit, go get your coaching license, start your fucking career, and then get hired and see how it goes. But it's so annoying to hear over and over and over again. Like, seriously, you're tallying up, where these guys are from or playing.
They are.
And it's ridiculous. Like,
I mean,
Lisandro Paul boring ass lives. Yeah.
Lisandro Paul posted that.
But that fool's retired, sipping on wine, like, and unfortunately has a mic,
You brought it up, so okay. I blame you. Okay. You brought it up.
It's okay. I'll take all the blame.
I'll tell you something. He posted that whole thing. 10 national players. You tell me, why didn't he post that on the first game against Granada, where we also had 10 players from the local league?
Yeah, because
why hasn't he said that in the whole qualifiers when our starting lineup was 8-9 players from the local league?
So you were counting? No, I'm just saying.
Oh, I am. I'm not counting, but I observe those points when I see all those
reactions. The reactions.
Yeah, I check because I try to be a pretty forgot the word, but
objective.
I try to be objective. I try to listen to the arguments, then I look at the facts. And some people like facts, and some people like alternative facts. And we know that very well here in the United States. And those people are just waiting. Just like you said, they have a tally and they're waiting to say something to attack
their got calculators point. Like 1 + 1.
So you say that now that we're having a good performance, I mean the national team is having a good performance, you're going to point out that there are 10 players from the local league. But why didn't you say that 2 games prior, where we also had the same amount of players from the local league, and they were not very happy about the results? So it's BS. And here's another thing I want to say, and this is because I've been giving this a lot of thought. I think that there's a misconception or a misinterpretation. Some people do it on purpose with malice, and some other people just lack the knowledge and the education to understand certain things, the whole USL thing, whatever. But their whole mentality is club-based mentality.
We're a tribal people, man. But we're very tribal in that sense. It goes back very embedded in the culture.
Yeah. But this is the thing. When you have a club team, any club from the local league. You bring players from abroad and you pay them more money. And the whole idea behind that, and this is not in El Salvador only, this is around the world. The whole idea is that you feel that you don't have enough good players in those positions in your own country, and therefore you have to go abroad and bring those players and pay them more money. And in that case, you might argue that those players are taking a spot away from a local player. And
Yeah, on the nail.
that's not something,
Xenophobia on the
but that's not
selección,
something that
nothing
happens
but.
only in football, soccer. It happens in work, in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are visas to bring those talents from other countries to work in your country, in this country, in the US in this case. When it comes to the national team, it's different. And I don't know if people have really thought about this. I've been giving it a lot of thought. And some people may argue that that's not the case, and that's fine. This is just the point of view. When it comes to the national team, that's not the case. First of all, you are not paying the guys born in a different country more money than the local ones to come and play for the national team. They are part of a pool of eligible players that can represent the country. That's it. All of them, whether they were born in El Salvador or whether they were born in China or Mongolia or Qatar, I don't care where they were born. They are being considered for the national team because they hold the nationality to represent that team, and they are eligible to play for that team. So they are not taking the spot from any local player. They are not, because they are also Salvadorians. They also qualify to play. They have the same rights. It is different when you nationalize a player, when you naturalize a player. In that case, you can argue the same argument with club teams. You are naturalizing a player who has nothing to do with your country, has absolutely no connection to your country, because you feel that you do not have the talent in that position in your eligible pool, and therefore you need to go out there and get someone who was not born in that country, whose parents were not born in that country, whose grandparents were not born in that country. But you have the need, you're going to go through the whole process, which costs money, and it's a pretty lengthy process to nationalize a player to play for your national team. That's different. That's a whole different argument. So I feel that when people try to separate the foreign-born and the local-born players, they are looking at it from a club perspective. I go out and I buy a player, I bring a player from another country because I don't have good forwards in my country. So I go to Brazil, I go to Argentina, to the 5th and the 6th division there, and I bring one of those because they're better than the ones I have. And I'm going to pay them more money. That's how a club works. National team is different. If they're eligible, it means that they are Salvadorians. Just to extend this a little more, let's say theoretically our best 11 is in the local league. Great. Our best 11 is local players from the LMF. But after that, the other 11, 12 players that are on the bench, maybe there's a big gap in between the starters and those. And perhaps those guys from the USL are closer to the starting 11 who are local born. So because in a national team, you choose the best eligible players, the coach thinks that the USL players might be closer to those starters from the local league, and that's how they choose. So I don't know if people have thought about this, but I just want to throw this out there just to kind of start thinking about it. We're not talking clubs. We are talking a national team in which the coach, el seleccionador, chooses the best 23 players that are eligible to play according to his style, according to his needs, and that's it. It
And
doesn't matter where they were born.
objectives. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you see here is you've never had a coach. Actually, no, that's a lie. There have been other coaches that have criticized the local league, that have criticized the state of Salvadoran soccer. But I think what has happened is you have Hugo Perez that's been very direct, not only to the press, to their faces, direct to international press when he's made statements where he's criticizing the league. Some of it might have been misinterpreted or publicized in a way that could ruffle feathers. Like, for example, during one of the broadcasts, I think it was during Gold Cup, that in English they were saying, "Oh yeah, Hugo Perez just signed. He's talked about the speed of the local league, how it's very slow, to the point that he could still play." So, you hear this, and the people that own these teams or their interests are vested in the product in El Salvador, of course they're going to get upset. And I think that's the basis of all of this, is that the product, the level or the quality of the product of La Liga Mayor has been questioned and published and vocalized.
Since the Milovan days, since prior, but Milovan did the same thing.
But I think what's happening now is they have this target of a member of the diaspora, in a sense, right? That's come back, that's very direct with the press. And for some reason, the press, since they're vested in covering this league, like, it's in their interest that the LMF exists and doesn't fold. For whatever reason, they've decided to start this PR campaign of trying to save or highlight the dignity of the LMF because the national team coach has been so critical of the state of it, which is just, it boggles my mind, because like you said, none of this is news. Like, I remember even, for me, like 20 years ago, where FAS was winning championships left and right with Chochera, but you'd watch the local games on Fox en Español back in the day. And the speed was like, wait, what? It was it was an acquired taste, And I think especially now, with the concept of clickbait, followers, notoriety, growing your followers and being a pundit, I think some of these things have been manipulated, and a lot of people have fallen for it because, like I said previously, we tend to be a very tribal people. Like, when it comes to sports, politically, we choose, our little group, and we'll fight the shit out of the other one. We'll throw piedras, machetazos, and even worse. Like, that, it speaks to our culture. My grandpa used to talk to me. He went to a colegio in San Salvador called Garcia Flamenco, and he would talk to me about, oh yeah, even in the 40s, for the basketball school tournaments, we would beat the shit out of the other schools. The barras se daban verga. And we're talking about the 40s and collegiate basketball, and that's something that still lives on today, of those rivalries of the private schools and the public schools. And so that's what I'm saying, is like, I feel like this has been kind of like appropriated by the press so that they have something to talk about, or something to gain notoriety, something to gain attention from. And I think it's, one thing could be, oh, do you like the way Hugo Perez talks to the media? That can be one thing they handle, because they're the ones dealing with them. The other thing shouldn't be, place of birth if they're Salvadoran. Like it's just ridiculous. It's cheap. And I'm sorry, when it comes to Don Lisi, like dude's retired. Good for him that now he's like he has a platform and whatnot. Like cool. But if you're buying into it, like, yo, like you have to rethink your critical thinking because some of it is just kind of incoherent fallacies. It just sounds like someone that's bitter that wishes they were a part of something and they're not anymore. So we'll see how that plays out. Circling back, I think this U20 team has a potential to show what a team built from players, no matter where they're from, but just because they have that level are there, and you can show that unity that transcends just the borders of El Salvador, because we're out here, we've been out here, and some of these kids are coming back and they're growing something, within El Salvador going back. And that's something that's been clear as day since Arturo showed up, how we do have this potential as members of the diaspora or Salvadorans abroad to go back and contribute one way or another. So we're going to end on that, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, but you don't have the right to be talking about La Selecta because you were not born in El Salvador.
Actually, I don't have my passport yet.
So if you don't have a passport, if you're not even born, so why are you even following La Selecta?
Because I'm a masochist and I do not identify with the what is it called? Barras y estrellas, so the stars and stripes. I do not identify. I'll watch them during the World Cup, but it's not the same. When they got players like Tyler Adams or a guy that names himself Jedi, you lose my interest. It's just, sorry, can't do it. In any case, we're going to wrap up this show on that note. I hope the U.S. team has really good washers and dryers for all their kids, because I guess they're the only set that they had was for that game. Other than that, stop complaining. That's weak. Oh yeah, and go Doves. I'm so stoked. Warriors won tonight. Anyway, love all you guys. Thanks for following, commenting, subscribing. Shout out to Carlos Hughes, who was telling me how he was watching the game and his Brazilian lady was telling him, you guys are so passionate about La Selecta, but y'all suck. You guys are so bad, blah, 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 but you're so passionate. Of course we're going to be passionate. We made it to 2 World Cups. Being such a small country, we're the ultimate and they're the epitome of an underdog. How are we not going to be passionate about the sport? Anyway, Carlos Hughes, bring us some nenes for within the next 20 years, and we'll build a statue for you outside of the Chinese stadium once it's built, if it's ever built. But in any case, this has been the Corner Blue. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Twitter, the Gram. Like, subscribe, comment, keep hitting us up throughout this. It'll be a fun ride with those U20s, and we'll come up with a couple episodes to cover that, and hopefully they make it to the promised land for the respective World Cup next year and the Olympics. So let's see how it goes for these guys. And in the meantime, buckle up and we'll see what this transfer window brings us. So thanks again. I'm Andres Rico here with Uwar Varado, and thank you for tuning in. Have a great one.